My husband packed a suitcase to leave with another woman and told me, "If it bothers you so much, get a divorce." I didn't scream. I just opened his old laptop and found hotels, jewelry, a secret account, and a message that changed everything. He folded the navy shirt the way he folded everything, precisely without wasted motion, the way a man folds a shirt when he has decided the shirt matters more than the person watching him fold it. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and watched my husband pack for a spiritual wellness retreat. The cologne went in first. The good one, the Tom Ford I'd given him for his birthday 6 months ago, the one he'd said he was saving for special occasions. Then the new underwear, still in the packaging, which I registered somewhere in the back of my mind as a detail that didn't fit the category of mindfulness weekend. Then the dress shirt he'd bought last month when he said he was taking a client to dinner, the one I'd never seen him wear because he'd claimed the client canceled. I watched all of this, and I kept my voice level, because level is what I do when I am afraid, and I had been afraid for 11 months without knowing exactly what I was afraid of. "Does a spiritual wellness retreat require a club shirt?" I asked. He didn't flinch, didn't pause, didn't look at me. "I'm going with Heather," he said. "It's office-related." Heather, his director of communications. 31 years old, whom I had met 3 times at company events, and who, at each of those 3 meetings, had looked at me with the specific expression of a woman who knows something about your life that you don't know yet, and has decided that knowing it gives her a particular kind of standing. His phone was on the nightstand. It buzzed. The screen lit up with the specific brightness of a phone that is face up because its owner forgot, in the logistics of packing, to turn it over. I read it from the doorway. "I cannot wait to be with you, love." He grabbed it so fast he nearly knocked the lamp off the nightstand. He turned the screen toward him and set it face down, and for the first time since I had walked into the doorway, he looked at me. "That was spam," he said. I looked at him for a moment. At this man I had been married to for 7 years, who was standing in our bedroom with his Tom Ford cologne already packed and Heather's text still warm on his phone screen. "Spam has become very affectionate," I said. Something shifted in his face. "Not guilt. I want to be accurate about this because guilt would have been something. Guilt would have been human and navigable. What shifted was patience. The specific exhaustion of a man who has decided that this conversation is a cost he is willing to pay, but would prefer to pay quickly. I'm exhausted," he said, "by your constant scenes. If you want to be a victim about this, get a lawyer. Maybe then you'll stop bothering me with it." He zipped the suitcase. The suitcase we had bought together at a Samsonite outlet in Phoenix the week before our honeymoon. He picked it up and he walked past me in the doorway, close enough that I could smell the Tom Ford he'd put on before he'd even finished packing. And he went down the stairs and out the front door, and I heard his car start in the driveway. I stood in the doorway of our empty bedroom. Then I went downstairs, sat at the kitchen island, opened his old laptop, the one he'd replaced last year and left on the shelf in the home office because he'd never gotten around to wiping it, and I started reading. He had always assumed I was too trusting to look. He was right, until he wasn't. "My name is Claire Ashford. I am 39 years old. For 7 of those years, I have been married to Bennett Ashford, and for 11 months before the navy shirt and the laptop, I had been living with the specific sensation of a woman who knows something is wrong and cannot locate the wrong thing precisely enough to name it. Let me tell you about Bennett, because understanding what came after requires understanding what came before. And what came before was a man who was very good at being exactly the right amount of everything. Bennett is 43. He is tall, good-looking in the easy, maintained way of men who consider their appearance a professional tool, and possessed of a social intelligence that I once found compelling and have since come to understand differently. He runs the regional operations division of a mid-sized logistics company, a role that suits him precisely because it requires him to manage people's expectations while keeping his own plans opaque, which is a skill he has in abundance. We met at a dinner party hosted by mutual friends in 2017. He sat across from me and spent the evening asking questions about my work. I'm a landscape architect, a profession that people at dinner parties are either genuinely curious about or perform curiosity about while waiting to talk about themselves, and Bennett, at that first dinner, asked the kinds of questions that suggested genuine engagement. He wanted to know how I thought about space, about what makes a designed environment feel inhabited rather than imposed. He asked a follow-up to every answer I gave, which is a specific quality I notice and value. We were together for 2 years before we married. They were, to the best of my ability to assess them now, good years. Not the kind of good that was performing itself, but the kind that is simply comfortable and present. He was reliable. He was thoughtful in the specific ways I respond to. He remembered what I'd said about things. He showed up when he said he would. He was kind to my Aunt Dorothy when she was alive, which is a test I didn't know I was administering until she told me she liked him. My Aunt Dorothy. This is the part of the story that Bennett never fully investigated, and that omission will matter significantly later. Dorothy Marsh was my mother's older sister, an architect herself, who had spent 40 years designing public spaces in the Pacific Northwest, and had, in the accumulation of a long and deliberate career, acquired a house in Portland that was considerably more than a house in the way that certain places become more than their components. She had bought it in 1987 for $240,000. She left it to me 3 years before I met Bennett, because we were close in the specific way of people who share a professional language, and because she had no children and had told me once, over dinner at her kitchen table, that she wanted someone who would understand what she'd built there. I never told Bennett the full financial details of what that inheritance meant, not because I was hiding it, more because in the early years it didn't feel relevant, and later, when it became relevant, it had become too large a conversation to have casually. I owned the house outright, my name, no mortgage, no joint title. The property belonged to me the way things belong to you when someone who loved you made sure they would. Bennett moved in after the wedding and treated the house with the proprietary ease of a man who has always considered himself the kind of person who lives well, which is different from being the kind of person who has earned what he's living in. He made suggestions about the kitchen. He invited colleagues for dinner and described the house with the first-person plural of ownership. We've been working on the garden. We had the floors refinished last spring. I noted these things and set them aside because they were small and because the marriage was otherwise good enough that small things felt like the cost of the large good thing. The large good thing started to change approximately 14 months ago. I can't give you a single moment. It was a texture change, the way a house settles differently in a new season, the way the quality of a silence shifts when something inside it has changed. Bennett started working later, started taking calls in the car rather than the kitchen, started being vague about details in the specific way of someone who is managing two narratives and hasn't yet decided which one to keep. I told myself it was stress. He'd been passed over for a promotion in the spring. He was managing a difficult restructuring at work. I told myself that for about 4 months. The first concrete thing I noticed was a hotel charge. On a Tuesday evening in September, I was going through our joint account statements. We maintained one joint account for household expenses and separate accounts for personal spending, an arrangement that had seemed reasonable and that I now understand Bennett had found very convenient. The statement showed a charge from the Heathman Hotel in Portland, $347, on a Wednesday when Bennett had told me he was staying late for a budget review. I looked at the charge for a long time. Then I told myself it was a team dinner. The Heathman has a restaurant. Budget reviews sometimes go late and end in restaurants. I set the statement down, but I photographed it first. I don't know why. Some instinct I didn't examine. I photographed it with my phone and put it in a folder I created on my cloud drive and labeled with a date. The second thing was a jewelry receipt. I found it in the pocket of a sport coat I was taking to the dry cleaner in October. Nordstrom. A bracelet. $890. The date on the receipt was 2 days after Bennett had told me, with genuine-sounding regret, that we couldn't afford to do the bathroom repair that year, the one the contractor had estimated at $4,200 and that I had been planning for 6 months. I stood in the front hallway with the receipt in my hand for what I later estimated was about 4 minutes. Then I put it in the folder on my cloud drive. I did not confront him. I want to be honest about this. I did not confront him because I was afraid of what confrontation would confirm. I had been living in the specific suspended state of a woman who knows something without being able to prove it, and proof felt like a door I wasn't ready to open, so I watched. The third thing was the name. Heather Chen had been Bennett's director of communications for 2 years. I had met her at the company holiday party in December, then at a client event in March, then at a dinner Bennett had organized at our house, yes, our house, my house, in June, to which he had invited 4 colleagues and their partners, and Heather had come alone and had stood in my kitchen, in the house my Aunt Dorothy had left me, and talked to me about the renovation plans Bennett had mentioned with the specific familiarity of someone who has heard about them from someone who sleeps there. I told myself she was simply a colleague who Bennett talked to at work. People talk to their colleagues. This is normal. But I noted the way she moved in that kitchen. I noted the way she looked at Bennett when she thought no one was looking at her. And I noted, somewhere beneath the rational architecture of my explanations, that the way he did not look at her was too deliberate. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark beside my husband and felt the specific cold of a thing that has been true for a while and is now undeniable, even if it hasn't been named. I got up at 2:17 a.m. and went to the kitchen and sat at the island and thought for a long time about what I was going to do. What I did was call my therapist in the morning. Dr. Renata Voss has been my therapist for 4 years, licensed psychologist, specializing in relationship dynamics and life transitions, the kind of therapist who doesn't tell you what to think, but asks the questions that make your own thinking unavoidable. I told her what I'd been noticing: the hotel charge, the receipt, the name, the texture change. She asked the question she always asks when I'm dancing around something. What do you know? I know something is wrong, I said. I don't know what exactly. What are you waiting for? I sat with that. I think I'm waiting to be wrong, I said. What would it cost you to be right? I looked at the window in her office, at the November gray outside it. Everything I thought the last 7 years were, I said. She didn't offer me reassurance, which is one of the things I value about her. She said, when you're ready to find out, you'll find out. And when that happens, come back and we'll figure out what comes next. I wasn't ready for 6 more weeks. Then came the night of the Navy shirt, and Bennett packed his Tom Ford cologne and told me to get a lawyer if it bothered me so much. And I sat at the kitchen island and opened the old laptop and stopped waiting. The email inbox was open. He hadn't logged out. He hadn't logged out because it was his old laptop and he hadn't thought about it, because he assumed I wouldn't look, because the Bennett theory of our marriage was that I was too trusting and too comfortable in the stability of the house to ever do anything that might destabilize it. He was right about one thing. I had been comfortable. I had been, for 11 months, deliberately choosing comfort over clarity, because clarity was a door that swung in one direction. I was through it now. The first email I found was the reservation confirmation. Edgewood Tahoe Resort, 3 nights, deluxe Lakeview suite with private hot tub, couples massages on Saturday afternoon, romantic dinner reservation for Friday evening. Total charge charge, $3,847, split across 2 transactions on our joint credit card. Our joint credit card, the card I also paid into. The card whose statement came to a shared email address that I had, because I am a person who extends trust before I have reason to withdraw it, never thought to monitor. I sat very still for a moment, then I opened the bank statements. I was on the laptop for 3 hours and 47 minutes that night. I know because I checked the time when I opened it, 9:22 p.m., and the time when I finally closed it, 1:09 a.m. I sat at the kitchen island in my own house with a glass of water I never drank, and I built a picture that I wish I hadn't needed to build. Restaurant charges on weekday lunches and dinners. The kind of restaurant charges that a man eating alone doesn't produce, in the amounts or the frequency. Hotel charges I hadn't seen before, now that I was looking for them. Small enough individually to not catch a casual eye. Consistent enough in pattern to be unmistakable once you were looking. The Heathman in September. A boutique hotel in the Pearl District in July. A place in Cannon Beach in August that I had to look up because the name was unfamiliar. A coastal resort with rooms starting at $420 per night. I am a landscape architect. I spend my professional life reading spatial relationships, understanding how elements of a design fit together into a coherent whole. What I was reading in those bank statements was a spatial relationship with a very coherent whole. 11 months. The transfers started 11 months ago. Small amounts initially. $200 here, $300 there, moved from our joint account into an account number I didn't recognize and hadn't authorized. Then larger. $800, $1,200. A $2,400 transfer in October that corresponded, I would later confirm, to a week where Bennett had told me work was difficult and he needed space to process. I calculated the total at 11:44 p.m., sitting at the kitchen island with my hand pressed flat on the countertop to keep it from doing something I didn't want it to do. $31,600. $31,600 moved from our joint account into an account that did not have my name on it. Over 11 months, in amounts calibrated to stay below the threshold that would trigger automatic alerts. He had done the math. He had been careful. He had been patient. I had been trusting. Then I found the messages. They were in a secondary email account, not his primary, not the one the reservation confirmations had gone to, but a Gmail account I found because he'd logged into it on the old laptop and not logged out of that either, and because his password manager, which synced across devices, auto-populated the credential when I clicked the bookmark. The account existed for Heather. I read backward from the most recent message, which was from that evening, from Heather to Bennett. Are you on your way? I've been waiting. Don't make me drive to the airport alone. Then I read forward from the beginning, which required going back 14 months, and I want to be precise about what I'm going to tell you next because precision is the only way this part of the story is survivable to tell. Heather called me the lady of the house, not by name, by category, as though I were furniture, as though I were a feature of a property that had been inconveniently occupied by a prior arrangement. She wrote about me the way people write about obstacles, not with specific cruelty, but with the casual dismissiveness of someone who has decided that your existence is a logistical problem rather than a fact with moral weight. Bennett had written back, "She'll never leave me. She likes the stability of this house too much." I read that sentence 4 times, the specific cold of it, not the betrayal. I had known about the betrayal by then, but the assessment. 7 years of marriage distilled to, "She likes the stability of this house too much," as though I were a tenant, as though what kept me was property rather than love, which had been real, which I had brought to this marriage as completely as I knew how to bring anything. He thought the house held me. He had never once considered that the house was mine. Then came the final message. The one I sat with for a long time. Bennett to Heather, dated 3 weeks earlier. "Once I accumulate enough in the private account, I'll withdraw my half and leave her with nothing. She doesn't look at the statements. She trusts everything. It'll be clean." I read it twice. Then I understood something that rearranged everything that had come before it. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan. I closed the laptop at 1:09 a.m. I went upstairs. I brushed my teeth and washed my face and put on the pajamas I wear when I need the familiar weight of ordinary things. I got into bed. I did not sleep for a long time. What I was doing instead of sleeping was thinking, with the specific clarity that arrives when clarity is no longer avoidable, about what needed to happen next and in what order. I am a person who thinks in terms of sequence and structure. It's how I work, it's how I'm built. And that night, it was the thing that kept me functional when functional was what was required. By 3:30 a.m., I had a sequence. At 6:45 a.m., I called Naomi Reeves. Naomi Reeves has been a family law and financial litigation attorney in Portland for 22 years. I knew her through a professional colleague. She had handled that colleague's divorce 4 years earlier with a specific combination of methodical documentation and strategic patience that had produced an outcome the colleague described as everything she was legally entitled to, not a dollar less. I had filed Naomi's number in my phone in the way you file things you hope you'll never need, the way you keep a first aid kit in the cabinet above the refrigerator. She answered at 6:52, because she is the kind of attorney who answers at 6:52. I told her what I had found. I told her in the order I'd found it precisely, with the amounts and the dates and the account number and the messages. I told her without crying, not because I wasn't going to cry. I was going to cry later, for a long time, in the specific exhausting way of someone who has been holding something very heavy and has finally been given permission to set it down, but because I understood that the next conversation I had chat about this needed to be with an attorney, and that attorneys need facts rather than feelings, and I was capable of providing facts. Naomi listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Can you bring the laptop to my office this morning?" Yes. Don't confront him. Don't move money. Don't change passwords. Don't do anything that alters the record. Okay. And don't tell anyone who might tell him. Okay. Claire, a pause. You did the right thing calling me first. I was in her office by 10:15 a.m. with the laptop under my arm, my phone containing screenshots of every email and message, and a printed spreadsheet I had built at 7 a.m., documenting every transaction I had identified, with amounts, dates, and the receiving account number. Naomi's office is on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Portland. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a conference table that seats 8, a quality of organized preparedness that I found that morning deeply stabilizing. She looked at the spreadsheet. She looked at the messages. She looked at the bank records. Then she looked at me. "This is significant," she said. "The transfers alone constitute financial misconduct within a marriage, misappropriation of marital assets. The fact that he documented his intent in writing," she set the email printout down. "That's unusual and useful. What do we do?" I asked. "We document everything formally. We get a forensic accountant involved to trace the full financial picture, and we file when we're ready, not before, and not because he pushed you into it." She paused. "You mentioned the house. My Aunt Dorothy left it to me 3 years before I met Bennett," I said. "It's in my name. It was my inheritance." Naomi looked at me steadily. "And Bennett, is he aware of those details? The timeline? The title?" "He's aware the house was Dorothy's," I said. "I don't think he ever examined the specifics of the title or the timeline. Has he ever been added to the deed?" "No." "Has he contributed to any mortgage?" "There's no mortgage. Dorothy paid it off before she died." Naomi wrote something on her legal pad. "Then his legal claim to this property is essentially non-existent," she said. "Whatever he's been planning, whatever he told Heather about what the divorce would give him, he's been working from a fundamental misunderstanding." I sat with that. "He told her I'd never leave because I liked the stability of the house too much," I said. Naomi looked up from her notes. "He thought the house was what was keeping you." "Yes. And he doesn't know it's legally yours." "No," I said. "He's never considered it." She set her pen down. "Good," she said. "Let's make sure he finds that out at the right moment, which is not today. I want to tell you about the 11 days between that morning in Naomi's office and Bennett's return, because those 11 days are where the work happened, and work is the part of a story that doesn't photograph as well as the dramatic moments, but that determines what the dramatic moments mean. The afternoon of the day I saw Naomi, I went to my bank and opened a personal account in my name only. I redirected my deposit payroll. I have a steady income from my landscape architecture practice, supplemented by a consistent client base I'd spent 10 years building, into the new account. My contribution to the joint account was adjusted to cover only what was legitimately my share of household expenses that we had actually agreed on together. I did not empty the joint account. I did not move anything that wasn't mine. Naomi had been clear about this. Any action that looked retaliatory would complicate the legal picture, and I was interested in the legal picture being as clear as possible when the time came. I photographed every room of the house, not dramatically, just systematically, the way you document a space that you've designed and intend to keep. The furniture, the garden I had redesigned 2 years ago, the floors I had chosen, the kitchen I had renovated with my own money from Dorothy's estate. Documentation. Marcus Webb, my accountant, 18 years in private financial practice, the kind of man who has seen enough financial structures to know an irregular one at 40 feet, spent 3 days with the bank records and confirmed what I'd calculated at the kitchen island at midnight: $31,600 in unauthorized transfers, plus an additional $8,400 in joint credit card charges that were exclusively attributable to the affair, hotel stays, restaurant charges, the bracelet from Nordstrom that I had found in the dry cleaner's pocket, nearly $40,000 in 11 months from our shared financial life, redirected into a plan that was supposed to end with me having nothing. Marcus prepared a formal financial analysis document. Naomi's office prepared the evidence file. My cloud drive contained screenshots, bank records, reservation confirmations, and the complete email archive. On Sunday, 3 days before Bennett came home, my phone buzzed. A photo from Bennett's number. He had sent it to me by accident. I know this because of the message that followed 4 seconds later. "Sorry, wrong person." Sent, I presume, in the 4-second window of panic between sending the photo and realizing who he'd sent it to. The photo was 2 wine glasses beside a stone fireplace, Heather's hand on Bennett's leg, Bennett in the navy shirt he had folded at the foot of our bed. I sat with the photo for a moment. Then I forwarded it to Naomi with a single text. "One more piece of evidence." She replied within minutes. "Perfect. Keep it." Bennett came home Monday at 6:30 p.m. I was in the kitchen, drinking coffee. Not hiding, not bracing, just present, in the house that was mine. In the kitchen I had designed, with a cup of coffee and the specific calm of someone who has done everything that needed to be done, and is now waiting for the sequence to complete itself. I heard his key in the lock, his footsteps in the foyer, the particular sound of a man moving through a house he considers his, in the specific key of a person who has had a good weekend and is returning to the baseline of his ordinary life. Then silence. He had gone upstairs. I sipped my coffee. "What is this?" His voice from upstairs. Not the cold, managed voice from the doorway a week ago. Something less controlled. Something that had encountered the unexpected. I went to the stairs. He was standing in the bedroom doorway, which I had done to him deliberately, and which I noted he found disorienting. 4 boxes, 2 bags, everything labeled in the clear block print I use on project documentation. His clothes, folded, his shoes nested in tissue, his coffee maker, wrapped in bubble wrap because I am a person who packs things carefully even when I am ending things. Your things, I said. Naomi files the paperwork this week. The name. I watched it land. I watched Naomi arrive in his face the way a name arrives when it's the name of someone you've given power you didn't intend to give. His confidence, the confidence of a man who had spent 11 months believing he was the architect of a plan, flickered. Naomi, he said, carefully, you have an attorney. I have had one since Tuesday morning, I said. I was in her office by 10. He came down the stairs. He was trying to find the right register. I could see it happening. The real-time calculation of a man who has multiple modes of managing conflict and is deciding which one applies. He settled on the version that had always worked before. Controlled, slightly wounded, the voice of a man who is being unreasonably treated and wants that to be the frame. Claire, whatever you think you've found, you need to let me explain. I read every message, I said. I saw the secret account, the transfers, $31,600 over 11 months, the jewelry from Nordstrom that you bought 2 days after you told me we couldn't afford the bathroom repair. I watched his face. The hotel in Tahoe on our joint credit card, the email where you told Heather I'd never leave because I liked the stability of the house too much, and that once you'd accumulated enough, you'd withdraw your half and leave me with nothing. Each item landed differently. The account made him still. The messages made him pale. The specific quote, leave her with nothing, did something to his face that I will not describe because it is his face and he is still going to have to live in it. You had no right, and you had no right, I said, to use our shared income to finance your exit from this marriage for 11 months while telling me we couldn't afford home repairs. He stood in the kitchen of my house for a moment, doing the rapid recalculation of a man whose plan has been read back to him in full. Then the composure returned. Not the real composure, the performed version, the one he uses in rooms where he needs to appear to be the adult. This is my home, he said. I'm not leaving. I set down my coffee cup. This house belonged to my Aunt Dorothy, I said. She left it to me 3 years before I met you. The title is in my name. There is no mortgage. She paid it off before she died. You have been living here as my husband. You have no legal ownership of this property, and Naomi has confirmed that. Every version of this house that you told Heather you were going to share with her, that was a promise you couldn't keep because it was never yours to promise. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a man encountering information that reorganizes everything he thought he was doing. The panic that crossed his face told me something I had not known for certain until that moment. He had genuinely never investigated it. He had lived in this house for 7 years, had described it to colleagues and clients, and Heather, in the language of ownership, had built his entire exit plan around the assumption that a divorce settlement would give him half of what it represented, and he had never once looked at the deed. He had assumed, because men like Bennett assume. They assume the woman who trusts them hasn't looked. They assume the stability they're taking advantage of is the stability that will continue to hold them up when they're ready to leave. They assume, above all, that the ground beneath them is theirs by right of occupation. He looked at me. For the first time in 11 months, possibly longer, possibly for the entirety of a marriage I was now reassessing from the foundation, he looked at me and could not identify the version of the situation he intended to present. Claire, Naomi's number is on the kitchen counter, I said. You can coordinate with her about the boxes. 4 months later, we sat in Multnomah County Family Court. Heather wasn't there. She had left Bennett approximately 6 weeks after the Tahoe weekend, which Naomi had predicted with the matter-of-fact accuracy of someone who has watched enough of these situations to know how they resolve. The exit plan, the secret account, the accumulated funds, the promise of the house that wasn't his to promise, had depended on a divorce settlement that would give Bennett something significant to offer. When Heather understood that the house wasn't in the settlement, that the half Bennett had been planning to withdraw was being treated as misappropriated marital assets rather than legitimate equity, that what she'd been promised was a fiction built on an assumption that had never been verified, she made a practical decision. She left him, not cruelly, just practically, which is, in its own way, the most clarifying kind of exit. Naomi presented the evidence in the specific order she had designed it for maximum clarity. The bank records first, the transfers, the hotel charges, the restaurant bills, the Nordstrom receipt, Marcus Webb's forensic financial analysis, which quantified the full scope of the misappropriation and documented the private account into which $31,600 had been moved over 11 months. The email archive, selected messages, including the one where Bennett had documented his plan to leave me with nothing in his own words, in a time-stamped email that constituted about as clean a statement of fraudulent intent as a family court judge sees in a given year, the accidental photo, 2 wine glasses, the navy shirt, a loan application, which Naomi's investigation had uncovered and which I had not known about until she told me. Bennett, 3 months earlier, had applied for a personal loan using my home address as collateral, the property he did not own, the property whose title did not have his name on it. His attorney, a man named Douglas Park, who I understood to be competent because Bennett had hired him specifically, and who was now in the specific professional position of defending a case where his client had documented his own misconduct in writing, called it a financial misunderstanding. The judge looked at him over her glasses. Judge Patricia Holloway has been on the Multnomah County Family Court bench for 16 years. She is methodical methodical, precise, and possessed of the specific quality of judicial attention that does not reward performances. She wants the document, the date, the number, and she wants it in the right order. An 11-month misunderstanding, she said, not a question. Douglas Park said something about intent being relevant to the characterization of the transfers. Judge Holloway set the document down. The intent is documented in the defendant's own email correspondence, she said. Counsel, I've read the relevant message. The intent is not in dispute. Bennett lowered his head. The settlement that followed was, Naomi later told me, about as complete as these things get. The hidden account, $31,600 plus 11 months of accrued interest, was added to the settlement calculation as marital asset misappropriation and returned to me in full. Every expense charged to the joint credit card for the purpose of the affair, hotel stays, restaurant bills, the bracelet that he'd bought 2 days after telling me we couldn't afford bathroom repairs, was classified similarly and offset against what he would have otherwise been entitled to from our shared marital assets. He absorbed the credit card debt he had accumulated. He absorbed the debts he had run up in the final months of the marriage as the plan was accelerating. The house was not mentioned in the divorce settlement at all, because a property that belongs to one party and has never been jointly titled has nothing to be settled about. His attorney had, apparently, not known about the title situation until Naomi raised it in the preliminary filings. What Douglas Park had been told, presumably, was what Bennett had believed, that the house was the primary marital asset, the foundation of the settlement, the thing that would make the whole arrangement financially viable. When he found out the truth 3 weeks before the hearing, I am told from a source I won't identify that the meeting between Bennett and his attorney was a difficult one. Bennett walked out of that courthouse with what he'd had before he met me, minus the 11 months of expenses Naomi had documented, minus the legal costs, minus the debt he'd accumulated, financing a plan that had collapsed under the weight of one assumption he'd never bothered to verify. He had no Heather, no house, no story that held together when you put the documents next to it. He had planned carefully, meticulously, with the patience of a man who believed he was smarter than the situation, to leave me with nothing. He had never considered that the thing he was planning to take was never his.